Hello everyone. In this episode, I'd like to answer a question that I'm getting quite a lot, and that is, how do you zoom in to sections of your screen and then zoom out again? How do you do that in general, and how do you do that with OBS? And that usually then also leads on to saying, well, how do you get this little pointer highlight around your cursor during live presentations? How do you do that? And I'm going to address all these things in this video. So just to show you what I mean here, the effect, if this is OBS, the effect that we're talking about is that something happens at the top left corner of the screen, for example, the file menu, and I'm going to go and press a button and this happens. And you go, ooh, that's awesome. You see this in greater detail. And then you go back and say, hey, now we're doing something else. How do you do that? And I'll show you how to set this up in OBS, because it is actually a fairly simple trick. It's just kind of all smokes and mirrors. And so the other thing then is, how do you get this orange highlight around your cursor at all times during presentations? Perhaps we'll start there, because all these things are possible in post-production, of course, and I use a program called Camtasia for that. But that is not what I'm using for live presentation. So while Camtasia makes this possible to add a cursor highlight after the fact, and it can like gradually zoom into top right corner and then go back and stuff like that, that is all possible in post-production, but that's not possible with OBS. OBS uses a slightly different trick, and I'll show you how to set that up. So this pointer highlight thing, this highlight thing first, that is actually a product from a website called Pointer Focus. Don't judge it by its website. It's an excellent product. It only costs $10, $12, something along those lines. And it gives you a little introduction to this project here. So it's pointerfocus.com. I'll link to that in the description. There's a little tool. You install that once, and then you can customize what your cursor looks like and what it does when you click. So it comes up with this little red circle here. I think the default is kind of an annoying yellow. So if you can, just change it back from that. Use a different color. But that is what this program does, Pointer Focus. So that is something you install, and then it's just on all the time. If you ever want to get rid of it, that's in the bottom right hand corner. There's this little thing. If you open that triangle, this is the Pointer Focus thing. If you want to get rid of it, you just go and exit it. It has some customization options. So that is this highlighter option here. I can switch it off. Now the highlighter is gone. If I go and want to switch it back on again, so it's not on at all times. It has some other funky effects. So I'm going to switch it back on, so for everyone's benefit. That is what I'm using for that, pointerfocus.com. I'm not being paid to say this, by the way. So, but how do we zoom in to these corners, like top left and going back, and top right and, bottom right with that? So how do we do that? Well, that is done in OBS, and it's a very simple trick that requires us to switch scenes. And I'll show you how to set up these scenes, and we'll talk about how to switch between them. But for now, this is a brand new scene collection in OBS. This is probably what it looks like when you first opened it. You can create another one up here with scene collection. Just head over here, scene collection, and say new, and then you get another one of those scene collections. Mine's called test, and that's the one we're going to be dealing with. Brand new scene collection comes up with one scene that's just called scene, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that already, because I think we should call this one, maybe I'll just call this one the wide shot. You can also call it the full desktop, but what I mean by that is we're showing 100% of the desktop in question. Now, to set this up, under sources we currently have nothing, and that's very well reflected in us seeing a big black screen here. If you see something else, if you see something like this split screen here, then disable studio mode. That's on the bottom right hand side here. If you just disable that, then you get to this single screen again. If you don't see the black screen at all, if you see something like this, then that is in fact the preview that's disabled. So enable the preview, and then you see the black screen. What you'd probably want to do is capture your desktop. So you would go and add a display capture or game capture for a single application. I'm usually capturing my desktop. If I were to do that though, I'll just call that display capture, then we would see that. And that is just so super confusing. So I trust that's what you will be seeing if you're capturing the same monitor that OBS is currently running on. And that is perfectly fine this way, but for the purpose of this demonstration, this is just going to freak everyone out. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and remove that, but you would probably capture your display of either this monitor or a second monitor. Usually you'd have a presentation monitor and OBS is running on a second monitor, and you can go over there and switch the scenes on the second monitor, but you present on the monitor that OBS is not running on. But of course, because I'm recording this, I've only got one monitor. But to demonstrate what we're going to do in a moment, I'm going to go set up a media source here, and that is just I'll just call this one loop, and it'll just show a video loop of something. I'll loop it, and it's just basically a little file that I've recorded here. It's called Jay's Farm. It's a little Unreal game I'm currently working on, and that is just, imagine this is my desktop. So it you know, we're showing it in its full size. That's all we want to be concerned with right now. So if I wanted to zoom in to the top left-hand corner of the screen, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and I'm going to create myself another scene. I'll just call that one top left, just so that we know what it is. And I'll hit OK, and that will give me another scene. It's going to be called top left. So now I can switch between the wide shot and top left. Top left currently hasn't got anything in there. Now I could go ahead and capture the same scene again. So I can go and say get my display capture again if I wanted to. Or I can go and grab a nested scene, which is what I'm going to do in case I've set up something else here on my wide shot. I'm going to go and add another scene to my scene. So I'm going to use a source of type scene now, which lets me add basically a nested scene there. I'm going to call this one, I'm just going to go add the existing wide shot into this, and that will now show me the same thing that I have above there. But what I can now do, and this is kind of convenient, I can now go to the wide shot and right click on this here, then this menu comes up, and I go to transform, and I can go and edit my transform. I can also do that with the red handles here. I might actually do that, use the red handles rather than type in a numeric value, but you could do that with transform, edit transform. I'm going to go and drag my bottom left hand red corner out, in fact, to as much as I can. It's probably not even enough. I probably want to zoom in a little bit further into the top left corner. And there is indeed either an easy way to do this, either type in a higher numeric value or go out of full screen here for a moment and then just go and make this even more zoomed in than before. Perhaps, perhaps this is a good thing to grab that top left corner. And then you can go back into full screen on OBS. So now essentially we've got the first part of our puzzle solved already. I've got the wide shot, which is the full desktop, and I've got something called top left. And if I click on that, then I zoom in to the top left corner. And anything I'm explaining there will just be, zoomed in. And once I'm done, I can go back to the wide shot. And once again, I would do this switching either on a second monitor, or I would use shortcut keys to switch these scenes, either built-in shortcuts here in OBS, or I use a Stream Deck for that. Well, there's another video on my channel that explains all that. I'll link to that in the description as well. So if something happens on the top right-hand corner of my screen, I would now go ahead and do exactly the same. So I can go ahead and just click my bottom left hand scene and essentially just go and duplicate that. So right click, hit duplicate, and now we're going to call this one top right perhaps. And if I do that, I've got a third scene here, and the top right now looks exactly like the top left. The only thing that we need to change now is with the wide shot selected in my top right scene, we're just going to go and drag that one over to here. There we go. Firemen are already on their way. So now I can go to the wide shot, I can go to the top left, I can go back to the wide shot, and I can go to the top right. And if I do that on the fly with a few button pushes, and it's seamless, and you know exactly what scene is going to air while you're doing that, you can have a great presentation and you don't have to edit it afterwards. You can do the same for the bottom left and bottom right corner. Bottom right, if you're like me and you have your camera in the bottom right, let's just go set that up. I'll go and duplicate my top right scene perhaps and call that bottom right. We do exactly the same thing. We go and select the wide shot here, and then go and do this. But if you're like me and you have your webcam as an inset in the bottom right corner already, then I would recommend you just move this bottom right presentation over so that your webcam is kind of next to it, so that you're not in the way of what you're explaining, because that kind of happens to me a lot, that I'm thinking, hey, it's on the bottom right hand corner. Yeah, actually, that's probably where my webcam is, and no one can see what I'm actually pointing at. So that's when you can then go and switch to the bottom right. There we go. And if you hook that up to either shortcut keys or a Stream Deck, then, you know, Bob's your uncle, Betty is your aunt. So Stream Deck, yes, as I said, there's another video that explains more about it, but essentially a Stream Deck is something like this. It's a programmable little keyboard, and it hooks into OBS, and every time I press a button on here, it will then change the scene that's currently going live on OBS. So either live or recording, it works both ways. It's essentially a programmable USB keyboard, but you can use a regular keyboard for that as well. There's shortcut keys that you can set up. As I said, video on my channel, I'll link to that in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions, please drop them down in the comments. There's also a whole series on OBS I've made called Streaming 101. It is technically geared towards streaming, but it explains a lot of the OBS principles. If you have issues with audio or issues with scenes and what sources mean and all that, that is explained in that whole series. That is also linked below. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, then please share it with friends, family, and total strangers. If you want to say thanks, drop something in my tip jar. Either there's Ko-fi or there's Patreon or there's all kinds of other options also linked in the description. My friends, adios. Have a wonderful recording session with OBS. Take care.